I want to start by asking you all a question. Hands up, how many of you have walked into a shop this week and purchased some food, whether that be a salad, a sandwich, a fruit pot, or some vegetables? Yeah? Most of you. The fact is, this would have all gone through a food processor or food manufacturing company. Now, do you remember in 2023, in the UK, when there were fruit and vegetable shortages across all the major retailers? Well, this also impacted food manufacturers, resulting in product recipes having to be amended to maintain supply. This is a real issue, as these shocks are becoming more frequent and impactful as the challenges to the supply chain increase. This is what led me to my Nuffield project. I travelled around the world to understand how we can ensure a more resilient fresh produce supply chain. I set myself 3 objectives. 1, to understand the current and future challenges facing produce supply chains. 2, gather attitudes from key stakeholders, speaking to growers, food manufacturers, retailers, policy and industry experts to see where the similarities and differences in opinion are. And 3, what are the solutions to ensure a more resilient fresh produce supply chain in the UK? The challenges. There's no denying that climate change is a problem, and every single person I spoke to on my Nuffield travels mentioned this. I arrived in the Murcia region of Spain a week after the Valencia floods in November 24, where one grower had seen 35 mils of rain in one field overnight. This was a lot, considering they should normally get 30 mils of rain on average for the whole month of November. On a trip to Senegal, one grower had said they'd seen temperatures rise to 46 degrees Celsius last summer, the highest they had ever seen it. Other challenges impacting fresh produce supply chains include logistical and geopolitical issues, economic and labour pressures, and the changing consumer demand. But it's evident that the biggest issue is the unpredictability, not knowing what challenge will impact the supply chain next. Therefore, my first recommendation is all stakeholders within the supply chain need to be proactive and adapt to the upcoming challenges, which many of the businesses on my travels were starting to do. When I went around the world, I wanted to find out how everyone defines resilience, as it currently feels like a buzzword that everyone is using, including me. Interestingly, 66% of stakeholders in the supply chain said resilience is the ability to adapt and be flexible. However, I've seen this means different things for different businesses throughout the supply chain. If you're a grower, for example, they need to grow their produce to sell to their customers. They're adapting by spreading the risk of where they're planting and using regen farming practices. However, for retailers, resilience means availability and achieving a 98.5% service level. When I was in Japan, I went to visit Toyota. Some might say a trip to Toyota is a bit random, visiting a company that manufactures cars. But this is where I had a brainwave. How can lean manufacturing principles, which many businesses have been built around, work together with resilience, as some would think they do not go hand in hand? But what I've learned is the key for success is operational flexibility, the missing link for both a resilient and lean business. One industry expert, Louise Manning in the room here today, said resilience can be defined in 3 ways. 1, business as usual, no change. 2, bounce without breaking, survival and learning from experience. And 3, business reimagined, transformation. In an ideal world, businesses should revisit supply chain challenges, even if they did not impact your business. Therefore, my second recommendation is all businesses should strive to be business reimagined, investing in readiness, ensuring both efficiency and long-term resilience at every stage of the supply chain. It's evident with the number of challenges impacting produce supply chains, something needs to change. Therefore, I wanted to find out what needs to change and how we can make an influence change. And I want to share some examples with you now. We need to shift our mindset from short-term to long-term thinking with both sustainability and resilience in mind. We need to change our mindset to be more proactive, not reactive as we currently are. How? We need to get out our comfort zone and lead the way. In Kenya, I met Stuart, who made the decision to relocate to a region widely regarded as unsuitable for growing crops due to the limited rainfall. But instead of accepting these assumptions, he applied his technical expertise, experimented, adapted, and proved them all wrong. People like Stuart, those who challenge the status quo, are the ones who spark real change. Rather than accepting the statement, crops can't be grown here, he asked, why not? Mindset change starts by challenging why. Then collaboration. When I visited the Netherlands, there was strong collaboration between seed producers and growers. How? As food manufacturers, we need to engage with our suppliers and their growers to ensure we're looking into future growing varieties. And policy was an emerging theme for what needs to change. How we can do this is by turning up and getting our voices heard. As an example, I presented at the World Food Forum in Rome last year, where all government representatives around the world were there. As one policy advisor, Sue, on the screen said to me, the more we keep turning up and getting our voices heard, they will soon start repeating our same messages. But the question is, who is responsible for leading change? There is automatically a tendency to point fingers at different stakeholders within the supply chain to act and make change. But everyone within the supply chain, including the consumer, has a part to play. Therefore, my third recommendation is all stakeholders must take shared responsibility to influence and lead change across the supply chain. Ultimately, businesses will need to adapt and be more flexible to be more resilient. I've taken what I've learned from my discussions with stakeholders around the world and built them into a 4-step approach, which can be adopted by all stakeholders within the supply chain. Fundamental to this approach is a change in mindset, with a willingness to adopt new ways of working and challenge the status quo, like Stuart did in Kenya. Step 1 of my approach is to introduce a resilience risk assessment, which is built on factual data from supply challenges and customer feedback. An important aspect to this risk assessment is contingency planning. This should not only focus on having alternative suppliers, but also ensuring flexibility of product types. In Chile, I visited a sandwich and salads manufacturing company. They typically sell mixed salads that had different varieties of lettuce in, so if there is ever a shortage of supply, or it's not the right season for a certain variety, it did not matter. And step 2, action. Now this will differ by stakeholder and is detailed within my report, but for food manufacturers, some examples are collaboration, focusing on projects through our experts, working more closely with our suppliers and their growers, like I saw in the Netherlands, and dynamic specifications. As we all know, produce is not always perfect, and with the increasing shocks within the supply chain, we should consider how we can open, not narrow specifications, moving to dynamic specifications that adapt to the crop, which some potato growers in Poland and the UK have done with their customers. Even discussions with the UK retailers suggested that opening specifications would be beneficial to ensuring supply. Step 3, transformation. Building resilience requires an upfront investment of time and resources, which in my opinion is the biggest risk to adoption. However, I believe the long-term economic impact of inaction will outweigh these initial costs. Therefore, these steps in step 1 to 2 will slowly move to transformation, leading to product and packaging development changes. And step 4, future planning. It's vital resilience plans are continually monitored and adapted, depending on the emerging risks and insights. In some cases, businesses may need to loop back through step 1 to 4 within my 4-step approach. And this adaptability is critical to maintain relevancy. Adopting this 4-step approach across the supply chain through small incremental changes is my final recommendation to ensure a more resilient fresh produce supply chain in the UK. So since returning from my travels, what have I done? I've shared my findings presenting at the Procurement and Senior Leadership Conference this year to start the process of changing people's mindsets. Since starting my scholarship, I've been promoted and moved into the world of ready meals. I've been working with our procurement teams on various raw material contingency projects. This has included adding additional suppliers for contingency and adding more produce varieties to specifications where needed. In a recent meeting with a potato supplier, we learned that higher potato dry matter levels could be expected in future, which ultimately changes how we process potatoes. Therefore, I'm leading a project focused on data collection and trials to future-proof our business. This work will help us adapt to the evolving raw material changes to make us more resilient, demonstrating a proactive rather than reactive approach. Ultimately, I believe that food manufacturers and retailers determine what the end consumer eats, and therefore we can have the biggest influence for change. These steps, while only small, will continue to play a big role in ensuring a more resilient produce supply chain. They say there's never a right time to complete a Nuffield scholarship. To say the past 2 years has been busy is an understatement. I completed my Nuffield travel. We bought our first home. I got engaged. I completed an Ironman 70.3. We had our second successful lambing, and we got married last month. But I wouldn't change it for the world. This has been the best and most rewarding 2 years of my life. I would like to end by saying a massive thank you to my sponsors, the Food Chain Scholarship, for sponsoring my Nuffield Farming Scholarship. To the many people and businesses I met along my travels, thank you. Thank you to Nuffield and to my 2024 cohort. You've all been amazing. And to my parents and husband Dan, who are here today, thank you.